Well, good morning. Welcome in. We're excited to be actually wrapping up this series that we've been in for a while on the book of Hebrews, this series called Jesus is Enough. And we've said this over and over as we've gone through the book of Hebrews. There's just so much good stuff in here. If you've been reading it on your own, you know how deep it is and how much stuff is in there. You know that we've barely just scratched the surface in this series. And as we come to the end of this letter today, we're going to be spending time in the chapter 12, Hebrews chapter 12. And there's so much good stuff in here. We're barely going to get to near as much as I would love to. But I think it'd be helpful for us to start first with a little kind of self-examination, a little spiritual checkup, just to get a baseline for kind of where we're all sitting in here today. So our spiritual life, our faith, it's a lifelong journey, right? Maybe you've even heard the language that it's a journey of faith. It's a walk with Jesus. Some of that language actually kind of originates out of Hebrews chapter 12. The end of verse 1 tells us to run with endurance the race God has set before us. This race of faith, this journey, this walk. So on this journey, it's useful every once in a while to just kind of pause and take a checkup to see kind of how it's going, how we're doing. So here's how we're going to do this checkup today. I'm going to put up two pretty opposite phrases on the screens. One very positive and one, frankly, a little negative. And your job is to just kind of self-assess which one best describes you spiritually. And I know the temptation is going to be like, well, I'm right in between. You can't do that. If you have to pick one or the other, you got to choose either the good or maybe the not so good. And I'm not going to ask you to say anything out loud or raise your hand. This is just, a little, honesty with yourself and with the Lord in here today. So, you ready for this? Let's do our first one to get started. Would you say that right now you are spiritually on a straight path or wandering? If you have to pick one, which one? Would you say that you are unencumbered, nothing holding you back on this journey? Or are you feeling weighed down? Would you say that you are spiritually strong and refreshed, or tired and weak and weary? Would you say that you are running with endurance in your faith, or you may be ready to give up? And our last one, would you say that you are steady on God's path for you spiritually? Or would you say that you're stumbling and maybe even about to collapse? Now, I hope and I truly believe that there are hopefully many in this place today that would say in full humility, no, I actually think I'm in a really good place. Nobody's perfect. We know there's always room for growth, but I know that there are some of you that would say, I'm on a good path. I do feel strong. I've got endurance right now and all of that, and that's fantastic. I celebrate that, but I also know that the reality for many of us is that our honest answers might look a lot more like the not so good ones. We're spiritually wandering. We're tired, maybe even ready to give up entirely. And I hate to be a Debbie Downer up here, but I think we also know for those of us that are in the good place that it's possible we might find ourselves in that tough position again. So the big question then is, what do we do? What do we do? What do you do when you are on this journey of faith, but you're exhausted? You're not even sure if you're on the right path and maybe even considering giving up. Just like we've seen every week in this series, the book of Hebrews has some powerful, meaningful, really valuable things to speak to us. And I'm actually going to give you some spoilers right here at the beginning. We're going to look at the end of the section we're looking at, and I want you to hear what it says after this checkup. Here's what it says. Take a new grip with your tired hands and strengthen your weak knees. Mark out a straight path for your feet so that those who are weak and lame will not fall, but become strong. That's what I want. That's what I want for you. I want to know how to take a new grip. I want us to know how to mark out that straight path, how to become strong. So with our time today, we're going to take a closer look at Hebrews 12. We're going to look at the verses that lead up to that and see if there's some things that we can learn that will lead us up to that encouraging thought and see exactly how to get to that place. So I'd love for you to turn to Hebrews 12 in your Bibles. That would be a great place for you to mark. If you didn't bring a Bible, raise your hand. Our ushers would love to bring you one in these Bibles. We're on page 733. Hebrews 12, as we mentioned before, it's so rich. There's so much in it. We're going to have to take it slow, not get to near as much as I'd love to. And actually, we're just going to start with verse 1, and then we're going to really have to sit in that and really pick out some really good things. So Hebrews 12, verse 1, let's start reading that together. It says, "Therefore, since we're surrounded by such a huge crowd of witnesses to the life of faith," and a quick pause already, that's referring back to Hebrews chapter 11. And last week we looked at Hebrews 11. Pastor Phil gave a great message on these heroes of the faith and what that means to us. So go back and check that out. But for the sake of time, we're going to press on. It says, "Since we're surrounded by such a huge crowd of witnesses to the life of faith, let us strip off every weight that slows us down, especially the sin that so easily trips us up. And let us run with endurance the race God has set before us." Now let's sit in this for a minute. I don't know if you noticed, but right here in this very first verse, you can see a few of the phrases and a few of the concepts that we use for our spiritual checkup at the beginning. Because in our spiritual life, we can either be weighed down and feeling tripped up, or we can be running free and running with endurance. And everywhere in between, obviously, but those are two very real possibilities for our faith. And this is such a good example of how important it is to see what the Bible says and also what it doesn't say. Because it does not say that the primary difference between you feeling weighed down and you running free is your life circumstances. It does not say that the difference between you feeling tripped up and you running with endurance is what's going on in your marriage or your relationship status. This doesn't come down to your health or your job satisfaction or your family situation or anything going on in the world around you. And I think we know this because some of the most joy-filled, most peaceful people I know are walking through unbelievable circumstances that should just be causing them to be a wreck. And then some of the people that seem, life seems to just be so easy for them and everything seems to work out, they're also some of the most miserable people. The difference in our faith between feeling weighed down or feeling free and with endurance is not our circumstances. This verse says it boils down to one thing and one thing only: sin. Now, sin is a very churchy word. It's a churchy concept, so let me be sure to define what this actually means. Sin is simply anything that we do or say or even think that is not the way God would want us to. You see, God created everything. God created us. And when we reject his way, when we choose to take our own path and step outside of what he would want for us, that's sin, when we're out of alignment with what God would want for us. And the more of that misalignment, the more of that sin that exists in our lives, the more weighed down and the more tripped up we feel spiritually. Again, regardless of our circumstances, Hebrews 12:1 says the weight of sin is what makes the difference between those two feelings on this faith journey. Now, the Greek word that's used here for weight can actually be translated, it can have two connotations, really. On the one hand, it can definitely just mean extra weight, like extra body weight. One of the commentaries I read used the phrase superfluous flesh, which is like the fanciest, most like probably British way of saying, you're a little overweight. You got a little superfluous flesh to you. The other way, though, it can be translated is more about clothing. This was probably in reference to like the athletes of the day, think like ancient Olympians, who would normally in daily use just be wearing these flowing robes and togas and all those images you can think of. But for the race, they would strip all that off and they would strip down to this like diaper-looking loincloth situation, or maybe even be just buck naked out of the desire to have nothing at all holding them back so they could be as fast and efficient as possible. And this verse is saying on this journey of faith, sin is that extra body weight slowing us down, or that extra clothing that's holding us back and tripping us up. Now, I'm not exactly a runner. So this conversation doesn't make me think about running so much as backpacking, which is one of my favorite hobbies. That's why I have my backpack up here. And when I'm talking backpacking, I'm talking like go up in the mountains, take absolutely everything with you, get miles and miles away from anybody else. That's what I love to do. And the reason this imagery makes me think about backpacking is how important weight is when you are on a long backpacking trip. You have to be incredibly intentional, incredibly planned out, because if not, you're going to be miserable. Honestly, you're a little bit miserable anyway, but you're going to be real miserable if you're not planned out. So for the sake of today, let's say that our journey of faith, this, race God has for us, is actually not so much a sprint, it's a backpacking trip. Okay? Are you ready to go on a little backpacking trip with me? You don't have a choice. I have the microphone, you're here with me. So if sin is the problem that we're trying to solve, if sin is causing issues on this trip that we're taking, it's worth acknowledging right at the outset that there are different levels of sin and how it affects us. Now, it all separates us from God, but there are different levels to how sin affects us in our life, because there is some sin in our life that is truly overwhelming. I mean, beyond just like an extra weight that we're carrying, there is sin in our life that is completely tripping us up. It would be like if we try to go on this backpacking trip together, and before we even put on our bag, our shoes are tied together. You think we're going to go very far if our shoes are tied together? If you have this level of sin in your life, you're not getting anywhere. And here are things that come to mind for this sort of category. I'm thinking stuff like a crippling addiction. Man, it's hard to move, right? Maybe an affair that you jumped into. Maybe it's legal trouble or really deep financial issues that you're caught up in. Stuff that is so significant in your life and it affects us so much in our daily life that forget running, forget even starting down the trail. It's like we can't even move. We're paralyzed. It's overwhelming the level that it's present in our life. Now, the great news is that nothing is too big for Jesus, that Jesus can overcome anything in our life. But until we admit that our shoes are tied together, until we face this problem and deal with it, we can't expect to really progress any meaningful degree down the journey of faith. So we got to start with that acknowledgement. But I don't want to stop there, and I think it's worth looking at some other things too, because in some cases, it's maybe not quite that level. Okay, our shoes aren't tied together, we're able to get our backpack on, we're able to start taking some steps down the trail, but we need to look at the sin that we're carrying in our life, in our pack, so to speak. And if we're honest, some of the sin that we have in our life is not some little small chintzy thing that's like no big deal. Some of the sin that you and I are carrying in our life is a ridiculous heavy extra weight. Like, what are we doing here? Why is that in our pack? This is stuff that we know is not good for us. It serves no use in our life at all. It's causing extra work. It's causing pain. And yet we're carrying it on this journey. And you know what this stuff would be for you. The Bible talks a lot about things like greed, lust, hate, rage, lying, manipulation, the list goes on. But listen, even if you don't know the Bible, even if you don't know the lists of these, possible sins, these are the things in your life that kind of make you sick to your stomach because you know it's not right. You know it's not good. They keep causing problems in your relationships and in your daily life, but you're still carrying it around. And if you've got any of these heavy rocks in your backpack, I don't want you to feel any extra shame or anything that you don't need, but you need to understand it is making your journey harder. It is wearing you down. And believe me, the minute that you need to climb a hill or need to go around an obstacle on the path, it's going to be almost impossible because you're carrying so much extra weight. Honestly, maybe you've been on this journey of faith for a long time. You've been a Christian for years and years, but maybe you really haven't gone anywhere because you've got this heavy weight in your pack. And it's such a burden. What are the big rocks you might be carrying right now? But listen, we're not done there yet, so let's keep going as well, because some of the extra weight is really obvious, right? We know we don't need this. There's no use to it. But some of it, actually requires a closer look. Some of the stuff that we carry in our pack might be stuff that we think we need, maybe stuff that even looks useful from the outside, but honestly, if we're really honest and objective with ourselves, we know that it's just extra weight. It's extra weight that we don't really actually need on this backpacking trip, and it's making the journey harder than it needs to be. These are the kinds of things I think in our lives that the world around us would never bat an eye at. Or they might even celebrate that you have them in your life. Like, good for you. Yeah, you need that Yeti. That's a nice cup, right? But they don't know this journey. They don't know what it requires, and they don't know what's going on inside you. They don't know that your motivation to work crazy hours and hit those goals and make more money is really driven by ego or insecurity or discontent. They don't know that your passionate, political position and your passionate stance on politics is really out of fear or a lack of compassion or no understanding of others. They don't know that time in front of the TV, that extra comfort food that you just keep going back to over and over, that last drink at the end of the night is really just to numb yourself. And you can convince yourself that it's not really a big deal. I can function fine. It's not that. I even feel like I need it sometimes. But the reality is, the longer you carry these things in your pack, the further you go on this journey, the more tired you're going to get. Now, from actual backpacking, I can tell you that when you are deep on this hike and when you're 30 miles in and you're climbing a mountain, every ounce makes a difference. And in our faith, this is a lifelong journey. We're going to be facing so many obstacles. We're going to be facing so many challenges, and we need to be ruthless in our desire to go through our pack and get rid of anything in here that is just not necessary. Any extra ounce can make the difference. I mean, what are we doing here with the extra stuff that we're carrying with us? But here's the biggest question that I haven't addressed yet. In our faith, in our spiritual journey, how do we actually do this? Because I would guess from your own life, if you've ever tried to overcome sin in your life, it is not something that we just will away or something that we work hard and overcome. Even if we try our hardest, these are things that just seem to keep coming back over and over. It's like it's got this power over us. Or maybe we make progress in one area, but then something else pops up over here. So how do we actually do this? How do we know what's sin? How do we know what's extra weight that we don't need? And then how do we actually get rid of it? Well, Hebrews doesn't make us guess at the answer, so let's keep reading. It says, let us strip off every weight that slows us down, especially the sin that so easily trips us up. And let us run with endurance the race God has set before us. We do this by keeping our eyes on Jesus, the champion who initiates and perfects our faith. By keeping our eyes on Jesus. Some translations say by fixing our gaze on Jesus. You were probably hoping for a different answer. It's okay to admit it, because honestly, I don't always love that that's the answer. Or maybe today you feel like you don't even have a clue on what that means, on what would that even look like, and that's okay too. But here's what I want us all to hear before we talk about this. On this journey of faith, Jesus is enough because he gives power over sin. When we're ready to go through our pack and identify what sin, what extra weight we're carrying, and actually get rid of the things that we don't need, the answer to that is Jesus, because he defeated the power of sin. Listen to what Romans 6 says. It says, when Jesus died, he died once to break the power of sin. But now that he lives for the glory of God. So you also should consider yourselves to be dead to the power of sin and alive to God through Christ Jesus. Jesus broke the power of sin by his death and his resurrection. And when we put our faith in him, and when we fix our eyes on him, that is how we actually go through this process. We want the formula. We want the checklist. In this conversation, we want the packing list that we can follow word for word, but Jesus asks us to follow him. And the farther you go on this journey, the deeper you dive into every pocket and every corner of your pack, the more you need to know his voice and the more you need to give him space to speak into your life. And I've got good news and I've got bad news. Because the good news is that if you actually do this, if you actually take this seriously, God will follow through. He is faithful to follow through. The bad news is that it doesn't always look the way we want it to. Let's go back to Hebrews 12. Let's jump ahead to verse 5. It says, "And have you forgotten the encouraging words God spoke to you as his children? He said, 'My child, don't make light of the Lord's discipline and don't give up when he corrects you. For the Lord disciplines those he loves, and he punishes each one he accepts as his child.'" And for the sake of time, I'm going to jump ahead to verse 11 that kind of sums up this whole train of thought. It says, "No discipline is enjoyable while it's happening. It's painful. But afterward, there will be a peaceful harvest of right living for those who are trained in this way." Now these verses, and especially if you read through that middle part, it absolutely leads to a lot of really good questions. Parenting, fatherhood, what about my dad and that experience? Discipline versus punishment, and what does that mean? What's the difference? So many really good questions, but questions for another day. For our purposes today, let me boil things down to one more thought. Jesus is enough because he gives purpose to the hard things that we go through. No discipline is enjoyable in the moment. It's painful. But afterward, Jesus gives purpose. And there's a harvest of peace and righteousness. When we let Jesus start to work in our lives, start to point out the sin, the extra weight, start to show us how to actually take it away, the end result of that process is a harvest of peace and righteousness. The end result is freedom and endurance and strength and confidence. But this points out that there is not a shortcut to that destination. It's truly a hard journey, a journey of sacrifice and self-denial and going against maybe the culture or maybe even our family, leaving our comfort zone to try new things. Back to backpacking. Did I mention I like to go backpacking? I'm trying to make you think that I'm actually cool and do fun things. There's one spot, it's not like I've gone a bunch of different places, but there's one spot that's been my personal favorite to go backpacking. It's my favorite spot in the world. I'm not even going to tell you exactly where it is because I don't want you to follow me there. But I will show you a picture just so you get a feel for how beautiful this place is. This is my absolute favorite spot to go. You can kind of see in there, don't look too close. It really is beautiful. And I could come around and I could show each of you this picture and, I could show you how beautiful it is and I think you'd be pretty impressed. But I think we also know that a picture never compares to the real thing. Right? Now let's imagine if I was actually cool and owned a helicopter and I could take you in my helicopter and I could fly you up to this spot and we could drop down and I could show you in person that view. I mean, to compare to a picture from seeing it with our own eyes, I mean, it doesn't even come close to comparing, right? It's infinitely better. But now, let's go on another little mental journey together, okay? We're gonna go on this trip, and we bounced our way up the mountain yesterday, and got a campsite near the trailhead, and we set up our tents, and we slept, fitfully for a few hours, and then the birds were going nuts at 4 a.m. and the sun was up at 5. So it's time to get up. We roll off our camping mat, we kind of gather all our stuff up, get what we need, we put our pack on, we lace up our boots, and we're ready to head down the trail, okay? And we start down the trail, and it's pretty benign. There's nothing too crazy for the first couple of miles. We're going up and down. We're getting used to the trail, making sure we're not spraining our ankles or anything like that. And we're heading down the trail for about 2 miles, and then we hit a creek. okay? And this creek isn't crazy. It's like maybe a foot deep and maybe 50 yards wide. But the thing about this creek is it's got a bunch of rocks like this on the bottom that are super slippery, and we have to be very careful picking our way across because you definitely don't want to fall. That would be bad news, especially because this creek is snow melt, which means it is ice cold. So you're trying to go across as fast as possible, but also trying to be as slow as possible so you don't fall. And so you got to take off all your boots and everything, and you pick your way across. We make it over. We get all resituated, get all geared up, get our pack back on, and head down the trail for about another mile. And then we got to cross back over the same exact creek and do the whole thing again, and it's a whole thing, right? So now we're situated again, and we're heading down the path. This time it's about 1.5 miles, and there must have been a storm through here because there's a bunch of trees that are tipped over on the trail, and we either have to climb over them or maybe find a way around them and kind of mess with our pack, and it's kind of annoying, but we're still picking our way. And then we see this meadow, we cross this meadow, and on the other side of the meadow, it's the climb. You can see some zigzags on this hill, these switchbacks that are going up about 1,000 feet in like a half mile. That is steep. So we launch into it and our legs are burning. We got to take some breaks, but we make our way through it. We get to the top of that, have a little flat stretch, and see another climb up ahead. More switchbacks, more climbing. It is hard work, and we are definitely feeling all the weight that we're carrying for sure. But we make it to the top of that climb and have some more flat stuff. But this time we're actually basically above tree line. There's no more trees. It's just very rocky and maybe some moss and stuff. And we see up ahead of us these two kind of rocky peaks and a dip in between them. And from here on out, there are no more switchbacks. It is just a straight path right up. It's almost like an endless step of rock stairway that we are just climbing step after step. And man, at this point, we are so high up in elevation that our lungs are burning because there's no oxygen. Our legs are killing us. Our feet are probably full of blisters. Our shoulders are aching from the pack. It's step after step, just our head down, pushing forward as hard as we can. And finally, 4 or 5 hours in, 6.5 miles from the trailhead, almost 2,000 feet of elevation up from where we started the day, we crest the top of the pass. We lift our eyes and we see this view. Nothing compares to that moment. No picture, no drone footage, no helicopter ride, no ATV, no snow machine. Nothing compares to experiencing that moment because of the work and the effort and the struggle and the pain that got us to that view. No discipline is enjoyable while it's happening. It's painful. But if our eyes are fixed on Jesus, there's purpose to the hard things that we go through. And the end result is a harvest of peace and righteousness. Listen to what Romans 5 says about this idea. It says, because of our faith, Christ has brought us into this place of undeserved privilege where we now stand. And we confidently and joyfully look forward to sharing God's glory. We can rejoice too when we run into problems and trials, for we know that they help us develop endurance. And endurance develops strength of character, and character strengthens our confident hope of salvation. So many people say yes to Jesus, start down this journey of faith, and they come up to an ice cold creek or a tree on the trail or a steep hill, and they decide it's just too hard. And they're carrying so much weight, and step after step just feels so painful. And some people just sit down on the trail. And it's so sad to me because they're missing the view at the top of the hill. They're missing what they could experience around the corner if they shed the weight, if they pushed through. When we fix our eyes on Jesus, he gives power over sin to make our pack a little lighter, and he gives purpose to the hard parts of the journey. And when we push through those things, we experience what we never thought that we could. We can reach a level of generosity and contentment and wisdom and peace and joy that we never would have experienced without the journey. So I want to come back full circle to where we started. Because Jesus gives power over sin. Jesus gives purpose to what we go through. And when we fix our eyes on Jesus, here's what this turns into. So take a new grip with your tired hands. Strengthen your weak knees. Mark out a straight path for your feet so that those who are weak and lame will not fall, but will become strong. God, all year, we've been focused on trusting in you, believing that if we don't lean on our own understanding, but if we look to you, if we fix our eyes on you, you will show us which path to take. And God, we want to experience the fullness of what you have for us. We want to take the full journey. We want to go to heights that we never thought that we could reach. And God, some of us today need a new grip with our tired hands. Our weak knees need strengthened because this journey has been hard. So God, be so gracious as to point out the extra weight that we're carrying that we don't need. Help us cut out the sin that is causing this journey to be harder than it needs to be. And God, remind us that whatever hard thing that we're facing, that there can be purpose. And on the other side of it, we can experience so much more than we ever thought possible. God, thank you that Jesus is enough, that he's better, he's the answer, he's everything. Help us to fix our eyes on him. It's in his name that we pray. Amen.